cloud. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Sunriver Books and Music presentation of Hiking Trails of the Pacific Northwest. We have quite an evening for you with three wonderful authors of hiking guidebooks and a photographer that I highly esteem. Bill Sullivan, a fifth-generation Oregonian who has hiked every trail in the state of Oregon many times and continues to do so and put out wonderful guidebooks as well as other books that we'll hear more about later. Craig Romano came from New England to Washington, hit the ground running, has clocked about 30,000 miles in the state of Washington. Actually, I understand today it went to 30,016, and has written some wonderful hiking guidebooks also, including one about hiking with dogs in the inland part of Washington that I've used a lot. And Bart Smith, whose photography has just blown me away for years. Discovered his first book, written with Karen Berger, on hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, saw a landscape that was magic and photography that invited me right in. Fell in love with that photography and have, I believe, every photography book that he has published except for two, which I'm now going to try and get. So Hiking Trails of the Pacific Northwest has got a rock star photographer in Bart Smith. At the end of today's presentation, we'll have question and answer. The chat has been disabled, so please do go ahead and type your questions into the question and answer that we'll get to at the end of the presentation. And with that, you're going to see me disappear, or guess not see me. And I'm turning this over to Bill, Craig, and Bart.
So hi, welcome everybody to our presentation for Sunriver Books and Music on hiking trails of the Pacific Northwest. And we want to show not only the most beautiful bucket list trails in the Northwest, but also a few less known ones that we think could use a little bit of protection and a little more interest. So we're going to first start out by talking a little bit about our own background, so you get to know us better. The star of the show really tonight is Bart Smith. So we're going to have him go first, and then I'll talk about my background and Craig about his, and then we'll go through the whole Pacific Northwest with Bart and me talking about the trails of Oregon and Northern California, and Craig and Bart talking about the trails of Washington and British Columbia. And with that, let's turn it over to Bart and tell us, Bart, why is it when I Google you, I come up with the man who hiked tall? You're not that tall.
Yes, and I found that peculiar as well. A lot of people aren't familiar with my story necessarily. And when I looked that up, I thought, well, what's that about, since I'm about 5'10" on a good day? But what it is, it's an article, links to a backpacker article that talks about my project of walking and photographically documenting America's entire national trail system, which includes 11 national scenic trails and 19 national historic trails. And you could ask yourself, who would be crazy enough to do something like that? And it's that little fella there in the red jacket. That's myself with my family in Madison, Wisconsin in 1964. And I had no idea what was coming my way. But my parents made one of the most impactful events in my life was moving us to the Northwest, the great Northwest, in large measure because my dad just absolutely loved the outdoors and loved the mountains. And so this gave him an opportunity to take our family all over the Northwest, and really ambitious hikes, looking back on it. And through the entire time, he always carried a keen Exacta camera with him and took a lot of emphasis on photographing the nature. And as I grew older, that carried that love for nature with me. And in my 20s, I started photographing with a point and shoot. And that's what this image is. It's just a point and shoot. But I always took a lot of effort to try to get a good image, even though I didn't really know what I was doing. But as things progressed, I got an SLR and some lenses and a tripod. And then I had this crazy idea of walking the Pacific Crest Trail and photographing it over, which I knew was going to be a challenge. It was a very grandiose thing to try to attempt. because my backpack was about 70 pounds. But I just figured if I did it over time and took my time, that eventually I might get a publisher interested, even though I'd never been published before. But 6 years later, got the book Along the Pacific Crest Trail. And I was so fortunate that Karen Berger was hiking the PCT in 96. And so she was able to contribute the text, and the book did really well. It's very well received. So I kind of felt like, okay, maybe I have my calling here. And it then went across the country to the Appalachian Trail, because that's another one on my bucket list. And thoroughly enjoyed just the different topography, the different terrain, the different atmosphere of the Appalachian Trail. A little more challenging to photograph just because there aren't the views necessarily. But the year that I walked it, 1998, was the same year that Earl Schaefer was walking it. And I ran into him, and we ended up collaborating on the book using his text and my photographs. And it was just a real thrill to work with Earl, who's known as the first person to ever, he's credited with the first person to through hike the Appalachian Trail. So it was a real thrill to get to know him and work with him. And unfortunately, he passed away not long after the book was published, but it was so fortunate, just very grateful to be able to collaborate with Earl. And so then I did the PCT, the AT, now onto the Florida Trail. And I'd never been to the state of Florida, but I was just so intrigued by the different topography, the different challenges for the photography once again. And what a way to learn about a state, as to walk the 1,300 mile Florida Trail. And here again, I was just lucky to work with Sandra Friend, who's a well-known guidebook writer in Florida. And then, so then I was on the Ice Age Trail. I was kind of getting the wheels turning here. And the Ice Age Trail, not a lot of people are familiar with it, but it goes for 1,000 miles through Wisconsin, which was my home state. So I was a real thrilled doing that again. It was a challenge with the mosquitoes. The year that I did it, 2003, was one of the worst mosquito harvests of in decades. And so I ended up having to wear mosquito netting. And I was actually pulled over by detectives on 2 different occasions because they thought that I was doing meth in the woods of Wisconsin. But over time, I was able to get the book published with University of Wisconsin Press, showcasing the Ice Age Trail. And so now I've done 4 trails, and I thought, well, maybe, why not do all 8 of America's national scenic trails at the time? And so I did the Natchez Trace and the Potomac Trail. But then the one trail that was the big obstacle was the North Country Trail, only because of its length. It's 4,400 miles, stretching from New York all the way to Lake Sacagawea in North Dakota. And the first 1,000 miles, I carried the 65-pound backpack, and it darn near killed me. But my wife had this crazy idea, brilliant idea really, of putting the backpack on the baby jogger for just the road sections, of which is about 800 miles, and canal sections. And so that allowed me to finish the North Country Trail. And so then I just had the Continental Divide Trail to do. And then I did have to carry the Beast. And, people talk about ultralight backpacking. Well, I do ultra heavy backpacking, but carried that back 3,200 miles on the Continental Divide Trail. And just once again, just having that camera gear, which allowed me to really, with original and creative ways, photograph the Continental Divide Trail. And I finished that at Yellowstone. And then that day flew to Washington, D.C., where I gave a talk the following day at Smithsonian Natural History Museum for the 40th anniversary of the signing of the National Trails Act. So for me, that was like a really big deal to be able to speak at that presentation. And so then I'd walked all 8 National Scenic Trails. That was my goal. But 3 months later, the Obama administration with the Congress passed the 2009 Omnibus Wilderness Bill, which created 3 more National Scenic Trails, which hadn't been created in 28 years. It's an unusual thing to create a National Scenic Trail, or to designate one, I should say. And so that was the Arizona Trail, the New England Trail, and the Pacific Northwest Trail. And that's what this photo is here. That goes from Glacier National Park to the Olympic Coast. And so in 2009, I walked and photographed all those. So I now had completed 11 National Scenic Trails. And this is my wife, Bridgie, who came out to meet me at Cape Alava after I finished them all. And I can't say enough about how Bridgie's the other half of this team effort. I'm out on the trail doing what I love to do, and Bridgie's taking care of the home front and just incredibly supportive of this entire thing. And she's a nurse, so it's not like we had a lot of money, but we've been able to pull it off. And we ended up getting the book, the America's Great Hiking Trails, which showcases all of the national scenic trails. And that came out in 2014 and won the Lowell Thomas Travelers Book Award, and really proud of that book. So then I thought, I knew about the National Historic Trails, and I thought, what would it be like to walk them? They're not intended to be through hiked. They're not promoted to be through hiked. That's not their intent. They pay homage to the history. But I just thought, what would it be like to walk in the same trails and read the journals as I walked and read the history of these trails? And it was fascinating to experience parallel struggles and rewards. One of them was just on the Oregon Trail, they talked about seeing the elephant. If you read their journals, they're always talking about, did you see the elephant? Well, all these 150 years later, for me, I saw the elephant several times. Just amazing stuff that I'd never seen before. And I really appreciate how much the geography and the landmarks, the geological landmarks were so important on these historic trails. It's easy to drive by and not think anything about them. But over time, I was able to walk all 19 National Historic Trails. And if there's one takeaway from the whole experience of walking all of the national trails, it's just really how kind and supportive people were the entire time through all the 35,000 miles of walking. I never had a bad experience with anybody, just the opposite. And so my goal with the historic trails was to have a book that would showcase America's historic trails. And it just came out last month. And here again, Karen Berger provided the text and Ken Burns provides the foreword, and super proud of that book. But the book I'm most proud of is the Hiking Trails of the Pacific Northwest, because this is my home region. And I've just been so blessed to have all this time to walk and photograph the Pacific Northwest, and really look forward to talking some of the trails that we highlight in the book with Craig and with Bill.
Thank you, Bart. And now let's hear from Craig Romano, who's I call the Bill Sullivan of Washington. He's the Washington hiking guidebook expert. But tell us a little bit about your background for writing your share of the book, Craig.
Yeah, I wasn't always the Bill Sullivan of Washington. I actually started off as a cyclist. I grew up in New England, in New Hampshire, and my first 2 trips to the Northwest were by bicycle. I crossed the long distance cyclist. Here I am with Vicatia. So you Oregonians, you can do the math. That was back in that was 1980 when I came out here. He invited us in, and the picture down below is my second trip. That's in Washington, where I-82 goes through now. That's not there. So eventually I got tired of the roads, and I discovered trails, and I started back in my home state in New Hampshire, which is one of the best places to hike, and I still go back there frequently. This shot's from last fall out on the Appalachian Trail. So yeah, I just really started discovering there's so many trails out there, and I wanted to just see as much as I could on that. And I mean, I really wanted to see out. So, leaving New England, there was so much of a big world out there. I went to South America for a couple of months. I'm down in Patagonia and the Andes. This is again dating myself. And Pinochet was still in power in Chile quite a while ago. And eventually, I started hiking in Europe and Asia as well. But that woman that's holding the South Korean flag over there, that's Heather. I met her when I went back to college in my 30s at the University of Washington, and she became my wife, and we ended up working together in Europe as guides for a Portland, Oregon company. And so we got to spend 5 seasons in the Pyrenees primarily. We got to explore a lot of other places too, like over here in the Pirin Mountains of Bulgaria, which is just an amazing place. A lot of it looks like the Northwest, actually. So yeah, that's my love was in hiking, and then through writing, tying it all together. And eventually Mountaineers Books had contacted me to carry on the legacy that Manning and Spring had left. And I started writing the day hiking series. Olympic Peninsula is my first book. I'm very proud of that book, still my bestseller. I ended up writing about the North Cascades, Columbia River Gorge, which is, I went into a little bit of Oregon at that point. I went into a little bit of British Columbia when I did a San Juan and Gulf Islands book. I've written about Eastern Washington. I've done backpacking books. It's over on Mount Olympus. Again, you know, the Selkirks of Eastern Washington, covering the popular places and some of these obscure places, the trails less traveled, I like to call them. I live very close to British Columbia, spent a lot of time out here. This is in Manning Provincial Park, this is where the PCT ends. The interior of BC and the Kootenay region, another great area that I enjoy. And then I had my first midlife crisis right before I turned 50, and I discovered ultra running. And here I am, my first 50-mile race outside of Mount Rainier. So I did 50 for 50, and I'm planning on doing 100K 60 for 60 coming up soon. So yeah, the ultra running really got me to be able to cover so much more ground. I've been writing 2 to 3 books a year, so I can just get out there and do, you know, some hardcore mileage and see so much more ground. I really like traveling light, though when I'm backpacking, I'm still carrying some decent gear, but I love the light traveling. And then my second midlife crisis, also in my early 50s, is that I became a dad. And that changed everything. And it was planned. People would say, your life's going to change. So my life changed. My lifestyle didn't change. And it caused me to slow down a lot. And I started seeing the world as a child again. And the neat thing is I started writing these urban trails books, which has been my latest focus, written 8 of those. And again, having my son along with me, it's been wonderful. So I've written books covering all over Washington, 25 guides. I've got 8 in the Urban Trail series. My Vancouver, Washington one is the latest one, right over the river. And then I got to write the 100 Classic Hikes, the 3rd edition that Manning and Spring had written. So that was a real honor to carry on that legacy.
Well, thank you, Craig. And so now I guess it's my turn to tell you a little bit about my background. And if you're Oregon and you do much hiking, you probably already know some of these stories. But I started out my hiking career. I guess I've always been hiking. My father was the editor of the Salem papers, so I was into writing as much as hiking. But then I decided I wanted to hike all the way across Oregon, 1,000 miles across the state, to visit all the wilderness areas, and naively thought the easy way to do this would be to walk through them all at once. So I went from the westernmost point of Oregon, alone with a backpack, to the easternmost in 2 months. And along the way, kept a journal of my adventures. So I was held at gunpoint by marijuana growers and poisoned myself with mushrooms and wound up hiking 40 miles a day through Hell's Canyon, trying to outrun these October snowstorms. And to this day, it amazes me that people read this book and it makes them want to go hiking. You think this would scare them away, but it's kind of become a classic. It was chosen one of Oregon's 100 books. My other adventure is the true story of the log cabin that my wife and I built by hand. This is out in the wilds of Oregon's Coast Range. There's no road, no electricity. You have to hike in 1.5 miles, even today. We built it using only hand tools, no chainsaw, just to prove you could do it the pioneer way, and partly because we were broke at the time. But we still live out there in the summers, and I have a typewriter, and I write my novels out there. I've actually done a whole series of murder mysteries set in Oregon. This is light reading to take with you when you're backpacking. The one in the middle, The Case of D.B. Cooper's Parachute, is the most popular book at Timberline Lodge. It's the great unsolved mystery of the Northwest. What happened to who parachuted with $250,000 and got away with it? And my wife, so we speak Scandinavian languages, and I've done a whole series of historical novels about the Viking Age, not hiking, but Vikings. And they're each based on the actual excavation of a real Viking ship. The one on the left is about the Norwegian Vikings, in the middle about the Danish Vikings, and I'm just finishing up the 3rd one, The Ship in the Woods, about the Swedish Vikings, out next year. I am, as I said, this 5th generation Oregonian, so I take my history in Oregon seriously. The book on the left is the human history, the wagon train routes and gold mining ghost towns, and how to find all these places and do little hikes there. And on the right is scarier: floods, fires, earthquakes, volcanoes, and the big tsunami they're predicting for the Oregon coast. Some books cover the whole state. The Atlas of Oregon Wilderness is the backpacker's guide to all the really remote places in Oregon. That's where I put my real rough adventures. The one in the middle is what my kids call the wussy hiking guide. It's all in color, and it has like hot springs and bed and breakfasts. And then on the one on the right is month by month. Every month of the year, I recommend 6 appropriate things to do in that season. So you miss the mosquitoes, you get there for the wildflowers. I am best known, though, for the 100 Hikes books for Oregon. Divided the state into 5 regions, and I update these books every year or two But that's really important to go back for me to rehike them and update them because things change. Just this September, we had a whole series of wildfires that changed a lot of trails. And then there's the coronavirus has shut down a number of trails, but also some trails have become so crowded that they're requiring permits for 23 of the most popular trails near Bend, like Jefferson Park here. Starting this May, you'll have to buy an advance permit, a limited permit, in order to do those hikes. And that's a reason to look for the trails less traveled that Craig was talking about. Each of my books has 100 more hikes at the back. And these are rugged, remote, scrambly, sort of also-rans, also sometimes gorgeous trails that I hide at the back of the book so that they won't get overrun. But the idea really is to avoid the crowds, get out and explore and not get lost, because I really do update these books all the time. And this book that we did with Bart, though, is more of a celebration of the most glorious trails, and then also an exploration of some of these trails less traveled. So Craig and I both gave Bart some tips on where to go hiking. And so we're going to start with talking about trails in Oregon. And you got to start with the most popular #1 hike in the state, Multnomah Falls. So Bart, I assume you had lots of pictures to choose from of Multnomah Falls.
You would think so, wouldn't you, Bill? Ironically, because drive by it all the time, and I actually thought I had photographs of it, and then when I saw your text, I thought, I really do need to get a photograph of Multnomah Falls. So this image is actually the most recent one in the book, and it was taken just this past February, when I did have time just to quickly go down and get a photograph of it in late February, and that was right when COVID was just happening, which is kind of hard to believe that here we are.
And it was after, though, the Eagle Creek fire. So you can see a lot of trees survived. These pictures of yours were taken, I think, before that fire 3 years ago, but it's really come back very well. The fire mostly burned the undergrowth, and in the last 3 years, it has come back nice and green. The only trees that really burned were on that were killed were on ridge tops and viewpoints, and actually kind of improved Angel's Rest. But then came the coronavirus this year, and it has shut down many of these trails again. They have been rebuilt by the Trail Keepers of Oregon. Volunteers gone out there on the Eagle Creek Trail here. They replaced 8 burned bridges by helicopter and rebuilt the trail. And it was all ready to go, and then came the virus, and they had to shut it down because of crowds. And this is now the problem. You need to get away from the crowded spots and find hideaways. And you won't necessarily get away from the crowds here, but it's another example of a crowded place that has had to been restricted. They now at Jefferson Park here at the foot of Mount Jefferson, starting in May, you'll have to get permits. So Bart, have you been there more than once, I think, to Jefferson Park?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you can see, it's unfortunate, you can see why these places are so loved. I mean, because Jefferson Park, it's just one of the true gems along the Pacific Crest Trail. But if you be there in July with the wildflowers, it's just magical. But now, and this image here, this was, this started out as just a little wisp of a cloud that just exploded. I've never really witnessed such a thunderstorm right over Jefferson, but the lightning caused a fire that burned for about a month and a half after the storm.
And in September, another wildfire went through Jefferson Park, but did not really damage the park itself because it's on timberline and there aren't many trees. It did burn all 3 of the trails going up there. So that's going to look a little different when the snow melts, and you'll still have to buy these permits. Another crowded spot in Oregon after Jefferson Park would be Crater Lake. It's not usually crowded with Oregonians, but rather people from all over the world go out there. Bart, you've there are other times of year too, I think, right? And
yeah, and this is one of those. I mean, Crater Lake, you can understand why it's so popular, but I've seen through the years just a more advanced visitation. But if we go there this time of year in the winter time, it's a completely different experience, and the cross country skiing is just fantastic. So you can go on another time of the year. And there's also other trails, obviously, in Crater Lake area, Sphagnum Bog, which not a whole lot of people visit, but I found it really fascinating just from a photographic standpoint. I loved it. And you could bring a family there, family members and kids, and so other opportunities for hiking.
So this one is Tocatee Falls, and it's one of the trails that people drive right by on the way to Crater Lake. If you're driving up the North Umpqua, on the way to Crater Lake, you pass half a dozen waterfall hikes. They're all like a half a mile, but you can't see them from the car. And wow, Tocatee Falls, what a beautiful overlooked trail on the way to Crater Lake. Now let's skip down to Northern California. And here we're going to take a look at the Trinity Alps. This is like a piece of the Rocky Mountains or the actual granite rock. I think I recommended that you take a look at one particular trail down there, Bart. Which one was
and that's been what's so fun about this project, is getting these different suggestions from you and Craig. And this one, yeah, the Caribou Lake, Caribou Basin was really a fun hike, and not too difficult. And the whole time that I was hiking there over 3 days, never saw one other person there, and really kind of gave me a feeling of the Sierra Mountains, maybe. But a real cool part of the Northern California that I wanted to visit, and so it gave me the opportunity. This image is from the Pacific Crest Trail. It skirts into the Trinity Alps. And this deer, I actually saw it at nighttime prior, and its eyes were lit up by my flashlight. And it was one of the scarier things I've ever witnessed, just because you don't expect to see something demonic looking at you at the nighttime. But here it was, just a deer on the trail.
Yeah, well, and what I like about this part of the Trinity Alps is it's the trailheads face Oregon. The ones on the south that face San Francisco, those are jammed with Californians. But the other side of the Trinity Alps is kind of our secret corner. And now we're going to go up the Oregon coast. And here we are at Heceta Head, probably the most photographed lighthouse in Oregon, but a very nice new angle here. What's cool about the Oregon coast is that just last couple of years, the state legislature authorized completion of the Oregon Coast Trail, 365 miles, the whole length of the state. And they didn't actually put any money into this project, but it's volunteers and donations are hope to complete this trail within the next few years to finish the gaps. So even before the gaps are finished, you can hike it. And I think a lot of photographers do. Is that right, Bart?
Yeah, the Oregon coast is obviously one of the meccas for photography. And sometimes it's a challenge actually to get a photograph without somebody with a tripod like me being in the image. But I think it's so cool that the Oregonians are building this new trail, because sometimes it's easy to think that all the trails are built and that's the way it's going to be. But I mean, once this trail's completed, it's hard to think of another trail that would, mile per mile, be more scenic than the Oregon Coast Trail. This image, I took this image on the last day of my venture photographing the Oregon coast, and I just wanted to get a cool shot of the sunset, and I didn't really know how I was going to do it. And then I came across Cave Rock, and I thought, well, is it possible that it'll go behind right into that little spot there, and boom, there it is. So yeah.
Three Arch Rocks near Oceanside. It's one of the first wildlife refuges in the country because of the birds that nest out there. Now let's go back to the eastern part of the state. And a lot of, the most crowded trails are in the Wallowa Mountains in Northeast Oregon. A lot of people drive all the way out there 9 miles from Portland. But on the way, they drive right past the Blue Mountains when the overlook trail's there. I think you actually hiked by them once, Bart.
That's right. Yeah. This image is when I was walking the Oregon Trail, the historic trail. And it's so cool to read the travelers' versions of the blues. They didn't see them as something majestic necessarily. They saw it as something, another obstacle they had to get over, hopefully before the snows came in the fall. But when I was walking past, and when I've driven past many times, I always wonder, I never heard about hiking trails in the Blue Mountains. And thanks to you again, Bill, you suggested the Elk Horncrest Trail, which was just a really cool trail. And you could really kind of appreciate the amount of effort that went into the trail. You almost wonder what they were thinking to do it, but it's there, and it's a spectacular trail.
Yeah, this 23-mile Elk Horncrest Trail through the Blue Mountains, where they use a lot of dynamite to build it. And you are almost guaranteed to see mountain goats on this. There are so many that they've put out salt blocks so that the mountain goats won't lick your tent and your backpack trying to get salt from the straps. So guaranteed to see wildlife there. It's also on the route of the proposed Blue Mountain Trail, which will eventually go all the way from John Day to Joseph through the, and here we are on the Strawberry Mountains, the start of that trail. And why did you take this picture, Bart?
Yes. I always love anything that has whimsy to it or something like that. And I just, to me, I saw the trail smiling back at me, and it was just roots. But I thought, I'm going to photograph that just so that people will believe me that the trail does smile back at me sometimes. And there it is, living proof. Now, this image, and this is an image of just a Zen moment. If you can capture a Zen moment, the lake is completely still. You have one fish rising, and it's just here. This is a Strawberry Lake, and the Strawberry Mountains is another part of the Oregon that I just found fascinating, that I'd never heard of. Yeah,
like a piece of the Canadian Rockies dropped into the sagebrush flats of Eastern Oregon. It's crazy. If you want to get a little more remote and out into the desert, though, you'd go to Steens Mountain. And what kind of wildlife did you find here?
Yeah, the bighorn sheep, which is so cool. I'd never seen any other. Maybe there are some other in the Northwest. This is the only location I've seen bighorn sheep. But the Steens Mountains, I'd always wanted to visit there. And I just got this impression of being back in Alaska. You forget that you're in Oregon. Just wide open, desolate, beautiful country.
Yeah, it's I think the 10th tallest mountain in Oregon, and you can drive almost to the summit and then hike here down to Wild Horse Lake in a hanging valley carved by glaciers in the Ice Age. The east side of Steens Mountain is a mile-high cliff that crashes down to the driest spot in Oregon on the Alvord Desert, where it sometimes doesn't rain for a year at a time. And here, I recommended that Bart drive across the desert to a trail that was not built by humans. So what kind of aliens built the trail to Big Sand Gap, Bart?
Well, by reading your book, I understand that it was wild horses, if that is correct. Is that correct? Wild horses?
Yeah, it's a wild horse trail. The horses are going through this gap to get to a spring to get water.
And this is one of those areas, one of those trails in your books that's in the back that, like you say, if you wouldn't know about it, but it's a real gem, it's a hidden secret. Really, really enjoyed that section.
And you think like you're on Mars here, it's so remote, but it gets more remote if you go further east to the Owyhee Canyonlands. And this is an area that was almost designated a national monument at the end of the Obama administration. And then there's now a movement afoot to designate it as a recreation area to preserve it, because it has no preservation other than a few small areas like here at Lusley Gulch. Now, this is a state park that you visited, I think, on my recommendation too, right?
There we go. Yeah. And another, this is from a photographic standpoint, just so fun to explore, because there's several different canyons and each one has its own character. And just with the eroded, I thought it was sandstone, apparently it's something else, but real interesting place to explore.
Yeah, it's actually welded rhyolite ash from an exploded caldera. This is from the Yellowstone hotspot that's been moving across North America, blasting out craters as it goes. And here it blasted out a 20-mile wide caldera before moving on through Idaho to Yellowstone. And this rock. Another interesting geologic spot, and we'll end our Oregon tour here, is Fort Rock. This is just southeast of Bend, where the trees give out and the high plateau, the desert plateau, begins. And it actually is also a volcanic explosion crater, but a smaller one, and has been eroded away on the sides by an Ice Age lake. So this was, I think, a new spot for you, Bart.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, I've never been to Mount Uluru in Australia, but it just to me, has this vibe of what that would be like. And this area I was photographing with a 4x5 with a curtain over my head, and just had a fantastic time photographing a Fort Rock. Really cool place.
And the lava nearby created another geologic oddity, and that's crack in the ground. I think it's a couple miles long, and there's a trail through it, which I think you hike.
Yeah, and it reminded me of the slot canyons in Arizona, just that it's very narrow. Like you say, goes for about 1.5 miles. So it's not a big hike, but real spooky in its own beautiful kind of way. And it's just, I mean, if you're in Christmas Valley area, I really would strongly suggest checking it out, because it's really a neat geologic feature. Yeah.
So that wraps up some of our hikes for Oregon and Northern California. Now I'll turn it over to Craig and Bart to tell us about the trails of Washington and BC. Why, Craig, did you start with a picture of Mount Rainier?
It is the most iconic peak, not only in Washington, but in the entire Northwest. Highest of the Cascade volcanoes. We can see it from just about everywhere in Washington. And yet, I mean, a lot of people aspire to climb it, but to me, I think actually being on the mountain is more beautiful. The trail, the Wonderland Trail in particular, was built in 1915, same time as Eagle Creek, goes all the way around it through every ecosystem of Mount Rainier. As Bart's captured here, the alpine, the alpine wildflowers, the parklands. So just it is an amazing. The old growth forest. It was our 5th national park, largest glacial system in the lower 48. This is amazing. The lowest glacier in the lower 48. So it is, yeah, it's a hiker's paradise as well as a climber's paradise.
And the one, because it is so popular, obviously the permitting to do it as a through hike can be a challenge. And that's on my bucket list. I've yet to through hike the Wonderland Trail, but I'd like to someday. But I mean, you can go and do, day hikes, section hikes all the way around the mountain to your heart's content.
Yeah, and if you're an ultra runner, we can cover some of those sections too without doing those permits. But as much as people see Rainier all the time, a lot of them don't get up there. And so some of the urban trails, particularly where Bart lives in Tacoma, which is very close to Mount Rainier, Tahoma, we really want to put some emphasis on the trails that are close to home. And this is over in Larrabee State Park, which is close to my home. I was just there today, running up there, just a wonderful area. So Bart, why did you pick some of these urban trails?
Yeah. Actually, this one right here is Snake Lake, which is just like 10 miles from my house. The one coming up, the next image is from Larrabee State Park, and that's from Bellingham. It's the Fragrance Lake Park. Is this one you might have hiked on today? Maybe you did. Yeah,
we were on this. We ran around Fragrance Lake, and yeah, it's just a wonderful place. The Chuckanut's the only place where the Cascades actually meet the salt water. They actually meet Puget Sound, so it's a special place. 2,000 feet they come up.
And it's only 30 miles, or a 30-minute drive from Bellingham. And then you hike there and you feel like you're in a rainforest or in a whole, another environment.
Yeah, it's a nice green belt between Mount Vernon and Bellingham and out to the San Juan Island. And of course, on the other side, we can see Mount Baker right here, Comacushin, one of the snowiest of the volcanoes. And so Bartel, and here's Mount Shuckson, one of the most popular.
Yeah, I included, this is an artist's view point trail. And I included this just because now we're in winter time. And I mean, of my favorite winter hikes, artist's viewpoint is it's tough to beat. It's easy access, and you have this Mount Shuckson to the north and right there. And then you have Mount Baker to the south. And in between is just this, some of the best cross-country skiing, in my opinion, in the Cascades. And here with Mount Baker, you can see that there's a little steam coming out of the crater there. And it's just, to me, it's easy to forget that we live in a region that has 15 active volcanoes. And it's just such an important part of our heritage. It's easy to forget that they're still active. Now here that was a winter hike. And so I chose a spring hike. This is in, because oftentimes, especially in like April, you just want to get out and hike a nice hike, not have to deal with, 12 feet of snow. But on eastern Washington, the Dry Falls Sun Lakes State Park has a really cool hike it's only 5 miles. It goes around Umatilla Rock. And it's great for family. If you got children, they could do it. And it really explores a unique part of the Pacific Northwest geology where these floods occurred 13 to 15,000 years ago. And they were so massive, they just scoured the landscape in ways that, I mean, we can't even, it's hard to fathom just how big these floods actually were. And so yeah, Dry Falls, Sun Lake. And then not far from there, there's another hike called Goose Lake Prairie. And that one it's not so much a trail as just open wandering. And when I walked through there, I didn't see anybody. And it's nice to know that Eastern Washington, for me, I'm just now discovering how much there is to explore in Eastern Washington.
There's a lot, and a lot of things. We don't have the desert that Oregon has. We have the channeled scablands and that shrub steppe, and it is definitely one of the under-visited areas of the state. So, Bart, we're going to British Columbia now. We're talking about Vancouver Island, a place that a lot of Americans don't. They usually go up to the mainland. So tell us about this spot here.
Well, and this is one of those locations that I wouldn't have known except for you, Greg. So I appreciate it. And what a cool mountain range. It's not easy physically. It seems like every trail is quite steep until you get up on top, and then you got a couple easy miles of walking. But what an interesting part of Vancouver Island that I was totally unaware of.
Yeah, it has wolves too. It's one of the few places there's wolves that's still on the island. There's the Vancouver Island marmot that would be found in that one park. That's Strathcona Park, which is 500,000 acres. Largest park on Vancouver Island and the oldest provincial park in BC.
Wow. This image is the West Coast Trail, because we got to include the West Coast Trail, right? I mean, it's one of the most popular trails on Vancouver. Well, you could say Canada, but certainly Vancouver Island. And it almost seems to be a rite of passage for Canadians to walk the West Coast Trail. And you can understand why. It's beautiful, but it's a challenging trail. I didn't get the permits to do it as a through hike. So I just had to go in and do day hikes. But even then I could certainly appreciate what a beautiful location. What it goes through such.
Yeah, that's all in the Pacific Rim National Park now. And that was originally very, very rugged. That trail was built by the Canadian Coast Guard because all the shipwrecks, people had to hike out. And then eventually it became a very, very popular park trail that's regulated. There's only so many permits to go out. So here's your alternative if you can't get that permit.
Exactly. Yeah. Just east of the West Coast Trail is the Juan Fuca Trail, which is much less traveled. And so you don't need permits. And it's still sublime beauty and not quite as wild. In fact, it's easier. And you'll see less people.
Yeah, and here's that sandstone too. That sandstone coast, very, very pretty. And then across the Strait of Juan Fuca is the Olympic Peninsula and some of the wildest country in not only Northwest, but in America. This is the La Crosse Basin, which is right in the center of Olympic National Park. No easy way in there, Bart. So tell us why you like it in there.
Yeah, well, for me, I photographed black bear a number of times, but I really wanted to get a good photograph of black bear. And so my brother and I went there in September of the year before. And oh my gosh, I mean, I'd never seen so many bear in one location. And you think you'd be kind of worried about it, but the bear they're eating huckleberries with such determination that they hardly even look up at you. But we probably saw 20 bear and a huge, big herd of elk and a mountain goat and coyote. I mean, we really kind of felt like we were in a mini Serengeti. And it's just so cool that there's still places in the Northwest with such an abundant amount of wildlife.
That's what I love the most about the Olympics. It was a national park in 1938, so there's no hunting in there. So the wildlife, like you said, it's the most bears I've ever seen in one area too. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
So we'll go across over to the Passaic Wilderness, which is another wild area in the Cascades.
And this is the Boundary Trail, which starts at Horseshoe Basin. And it wasn't that long ago, like in the 80s, it was a pretty remote area. It still is, but the Pacific Northwest Trail now shares the Boundary Trail. So more people are following it and discovering just what a beautiful part of eastern Pasayten Wilderness is. And for folks who like cutthroat, like fly fishing, the cutthroat in Cathedral Lake were just fantastic. So for fly fishermen, it's a good area to visit too. And it's a long, I mean, you can make a multi-day hike adventure out of it and really experience some beautiful scenery.
It's 19 miles into the Cathedral Lake, so it's, again, one of those places, there's no short way in there. And there's more people now, but the numbers are still pretty low. It's an amazing place. So talk about some of the old mines, some of the history of the Pasayten.
Yeah. And so now we jump across to the ocean, and we were talking about how spectacular the coastline is in Oregon, but Washington, we're so blessed with an incredible coastline across the entire Pacific Northwest. This trail is the coastline from Rialto Beach to Cape Alava. And this, as well was I took these photographs when I was walking the Pacific Northwest, which shares that section and actually ends at Cape Alava. And in this image right here, this was my last day of walking all 11 of the National Scenic Trails. And I was actually had a hard time focusing this image because I was actually crying because I was thinking, oh my gosh, I've walked all the trails now. What am I going to do? Little did I know I'd be walking the historic trails after that. But just a beautiful, beautiful part of the state. And so now this is our last trail, and it's Hart's Pass area, and it's the Pacific Crest Trail. And it's actually not far from where I started the whole journey of walking all the trails, because I started at the north border. But to get to Hart's Pass is a challenge because the road can be kind of scary for folks. But once you're up there, you can go south or north and just have majestic views all throughout.
It's the highest road, public road that you can drive in Washington, and it's a white knuckler in one spot. Dead Horse Point, though.
Yeah. And so so this is where it started, and this is where it ended. And I'm just so proud of this book that we've been able to put together. It really it kind of showcases and plays homage to just the incredible amount of variety of landscapes and environments for discovery and exploration, throughout the Northwest. As we all know, we're blessed to live in this region.
I would point out that this is not a guidebook that you're going to throw in your backpack,
right?
4¼ pounds, but it is the book to have on your coffee table to dream about and to wow guests that come to visit. So Dion, you can come on back now and see if we have any questions after we've talked about the overview. Maybe people have questions about specific places or questions any one of the three of us.
So if you'd like to, go ahead and type your questions now into the question and answer slot, and I will throw them over to Craig, Bill, and Bart. And while we're waiting for those to come up, so any of you that have questions, go ahead and ask them. Kind of a quiet audience today, so don't be shy. Just go ahead and ask a few. I wanted to say that this is a Rizzoli publication, and they do the most gorgeous coffee table books. Their books are exquisite, and it's quite prestigious to be included in a Rizzoli book. I think most of Bart's have been Rizzoli, haven't they, Bart?
Lately, for the last 10 years, yeah, I've been very fortunate to work with them. Yep.
And Craig and Bill, this is your first Rizzoli, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping it's the first of many. It is a gorgeous book. It is perfect as a gift, and it's one that you'll cherish and want to keep yourself. I keep going back and opening it up and smiling when I see a place that brings back memories. So great book. And we've got a question from Holly. It says, thank you, this gorgeous book. How long did you work on this? And Holly works at Sunriver Books and Music, is a member of our book club, and really one of the world's good people. So she's had a chance to look at this beautiful book and is asking, how long did you work on it? And thank you for making it.
Well, yeah, thank you for that question, Holly. And most of the images are of the recent era, but I've been hiking and photographing the Pacific Northwest for 25 years, and a few of them go back to the 90s, but the majority of them are of the more recent time. But I mean, I never really thought that the images, well, I was hoping that the images would make it into a book, but all these years that I've been photographing, it was really on faith that maybe I would be able to get a book on the Pacific Northwest. And to have it with Craig and Bill is just really just a dream come true, really.
People don't actually look at this book, I think, for the text as much, although we tried to make it pretty spicy and interesting. But for Craig and me, this is sort of a culmination of a whole career of hiking, where we have an overview of our whole area and can pick the trails that we think really Bart could get a lot of mileage out of, and that not only beautiful, but maybe you don't know about yet.
Yeah, Bill, you nailed it. I mean, Bart came to me about this project, wanted to know if I wanted to write the text, and I was just honored. And then when Rizzoli said to me, we want to include Oregon, all this, I think, oh man, I've hiked a lot, but I don't. And I thought, but I know who does know Oregon, and that's what I suggested. Bring Bill into this. And so, I think drawing on all our lifetime of knowledge of the area, and then we got Dan Evans to come in to write the foreword. And Dan, he worked with Vicatia, the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. So getting one of the icons of the area. So it's been an honor to work with all these people. It's just been great.
And a big bonus as well is that a percentage does go to the Oregon Trail Keepers and to Washington Trail Association. So that's a pretty cool thing.
And I'm a member of both those organizations, and I imagine you guys are too, and they're well worth supporting.
Yeah, in Oregon, they've not only reopened the trails of the Columbia Gorge, but they are leading the fight on finishing the Oregon Coast Trail. So the ones we talked about will be better trails with a little bit more funding and donations from this book.
Absolutely.
So do you think that there might be a hiking trails of the Pacific Northwest too, down the road?
Ray Atkinson, the photographer laureate of Oregon, started his series of picture books of Oregon with Oregon 2. There was no Oregon 1. Yeah, I know. It was to make it look like he already had this big backlog of I've already blown that. We should have called this Oregon 2, the Pacific Northwest 2.
Good marketing.
Right.
You have to do that.
Well, that would work. Bart,
Yes.
you went looking for the black bear. Did you have any fun encounters with them?
Well, now I have had maybe not so fun encounters on the Pacific Crest Trail, but in this case on the La Crosse Basin. You'd think you'd be kind of a little worried camping amongst all the bear. Like I say, they are so intent on getting as much blueberries as they can, for black huckleberries for the autumn, for their hibernation, that they could really kind of care less about you. But I did have an experience on the Pacific Northwest years ago where I actually got bit in my bit my bottom when I was sleeping in my sleeping bag. And it was after Bart was bit in the butt by a big black bear. Yep.
That sounds like a book.
Yeah. And I had my wife was cooking at that time. She was dehydrating food for me, and I had dehydrated chili. So it was because of the digestive. At night, 1 a.m, I guess I was passing, doing the thing.
Information, guy.
Yeah, well, it's something to think about if you're in bear country, to not eat foods that are highly gaseous. That's my
advice. Good advice, Bart.
Yeah.
We had one black bear on Vancouver Island on the San Juan trail you were showing, actually walk almost with us up to the parking lot and then kind of stand by our car. Flashman was looking at him going, really? We're going to use that car. You need to move.
I wouldn't be surprised if he'd been fed somewhere along the line. That can be a problem.
For sure.
No, he just was hanging out and moving around. We have question from Kurt Saul. Beautiful photography, Bart, for this book. Where was your best missed shot? And also, you mentioned your box camera. How often do you use it?
Good questions. With the 4x5, I don't use it anymore. You know, it's just now that we've turned digital, it's pretty expensive going with the 4x5. But I loved using it. I loved the process. I miss it really, but it's just with digital, it's kind of caught up with the clarity of the film. For the missed shot, that's a great question. You know, I know that I've had shots, you know, the shot that you're looking at right here of Mount Rainier, that was almost a missed shot because I was up there and it was just cloudy the entire time, drizzly, kind of just nothing. And then I was with another fella who was a photographer and he left. He said, okay, nothing's happening. But I stay around, and that's where patience can really pay off because all of a sudden it cleared up and it was just like, oh my goodness. So that's an example of, I guess, where patience pays off. But I know I've had shots that I've missed, and I'll have to come back to you on that one. It's not coming to me.
Okay, from Claire McCafferty. How have your hikes been different this year as a result of the pandemic? Are you hiking more, less, shorter distances, longer stretches? Are you seeking out spots with fewer people? What is the same? What is different?
Well, I can tell you my experience that we skipped out to Eastern Oregon and did a lot of our hikes. My wife and I, we'd spent 3 weeks hiking in remote parts of Eastern Oregon where there were no people, often no trails. Yeah. French Glen, the mercantile, there's sign says social distancing since 1876. It's pretty sparse out there. We also went to Mount Adams, which is the overlooked mountain in the Cascades. It's like Mount Rainier, is pretty in many ways, but so quiet you don't need permits. So it's true with to avoid the crowds, you sometimes have to go the extra mile.
Yeah, it's just like Bill. I spend most of my time on the east side of the Cascades, and also in the San Miguel Priest area, which is where Idaho and British Columbia meet. Being a trail runner, I can get in 20 miles in. I've actually been on trails a lot this year, seeing nobody. And here's another key. I spent a lot of time on some of the motorized trails out in Eastern Washington. Here's the irony. You can go out on a federal wilderness and there's crowded, there's 1,000 people. I'll be on a motorized trail and I'll run into one motorbike who's really nice. So I had some amazing experiences out in the Antioch range. Again, you just have to take the effort, spend a little time, get away. You're not going to find these trails a half hour outside of Seattle or Portland or Vancouver, BC, but they're out there. So people, yeah, it's a great time to discover the trail. You know, let's take it. Same in the Blue Mountains in both Oregon and Washington, another great area. The Kettle River Range, which is Northeast Washington, wonderful.
I have to say for myself, this has been the one year where I've kind of rested. I've been busy for the last 25 years up until this year. But I mean, I have to say, it's been tough. I mean, I've been doing urban trail, you know, talk about urban trails. I walk every day at our local state park, Fort Steilacoom, which I love. I mean, I'm so grateful for that. It really helps me out, you know, spiritually and everything. But as far as doing long hikes, you know, I'm looking forward to it. You know, I can't wait till this is all behind us, but this year's been a tough year in that regard for me.
Okay, from Gina, do any of you ever lead hikes? And thank you for a beautiful presentation.
Well, I've led a few charity hikes and my wife says, oh, no, don't do that anymore. So basically I let the books do the hike with you in spirit as you have the book. That's generally what otherwise like some for charity.
A lot like Bill, I do charity hikes to raise money for land trusts and such. So if you want to open up your wallet to the land trust, we do some great hikes, lots of fun. Or you can get in with my inner circle. I have a few friends who are hardcore that love to go on trails that might be rough. There's no promise. They can do the mileage. So we go in. You have to be intrepid, a good sense of adventure. But also, I have a wife and a son that I like to spend a lot of time with too. So
Yeah, in my case, I haven't. I'm not saying that I wouldn't or anything like that. I mean, it would actually be that would be fun to bring some people along. I do like the solitude. I mean, it's just part of my personality. I love being in the outdoors by myself photographing. Maybe that's selfish, but yeah, I'm not saying that I wouldn't. It'd probably be fun to bring people along for the photography as well.
Very good. So, Bart, you've now done, I think, more trails than any other person, including the historic trails. It's got to be some record of sorts. We have that book in the store too, by the way, and it's wonderful also, and would make a good gift this time of year. But what's next? Maybe all of the Olmsted parks, or what is going to be your big challenge?
Well, yeah, well, part of the challenge is that I've been so fortunate that I've been able to be away from family. I mean, all these years that I've been hiking, it's a sacrifice for family members and that kind of stuff as well. So I do hope to keep doing hikes, but to a certain degree, I have to just be grateful that I've been able to do as much as I've done. That's not to say I do have big plans, and we'll see if they come out in the future.
Such as?
Well, okay. The Appalachian International Trail,
Yep.
It actually now extends to Morocco. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to walk it from Morocco to the Florida Keys, but I think about it a lot. And I think that somebody's going to do it at some point, and it would just be a really cool adventure, obviously. But massive undertaking, I'd have to be away for over a year. But you asked me, I mean, I always think in big terms, and I guess that would certainly be part of it.
That sounds marvelous. I'll look for that
I'm joining you
book.
in Quebec on that. The Quebec section of the International AT is spectacular, the Chic-Choc Mountains. So I will join you on that.
All right. Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard it is, yeah, definitely want to
I've done that traverse twice. Yeah, it's wonderful.
Wow.
There comes another book. I can see that one.
Yeah.
So, Bill, are you going to do a book on the new trail on the coast, maybe?
Oh, well, I have a guide to it already. The 100
Yeah.
Hikes of the Oregon Coast includes every little section of the
Yeah.
Oregon Coast Trail and how to tie them together. So you can use it as a guide for that. But honestly, most people going to the coast are staying in motels and eating at chowder houses. And it's a very different trail experience than many of the trails that Bart has hiked. Or going from village to village. It's more like in Europe, actually.
Hey, I like doing that kind of hiking. That sounds great.
Yeah.
Chowder houses, a good bed at night. That does sound great. Okay, so we are at about time. So yeah, we are at time. So I'm going to ask one last question for Bart. Would you encourage somebody to be a wildlife landscape photographer, as you have been, to put these gorgeous pictures up there? Do you think this is?
Well, I mean, I obviously can't say no, right? Because I've lived my life doing this. But there is, the trade-off as to whether, you have a life that's, rich in experiences versus maybe a life that's, have a rich bank account. But I've been so blessed to be able to do what I've done. I wouldn't trade it for the world. But that said, it's not easy. I mean, there's sacrifices, and it depends on the person and how devoted they are to their photography, really.
Okay. Well, I thank Craig, Bill, and Bart for an excellent presentation. I am looking forward to having you all in our store in person. So that would be cool this coming year. If that can happen, we can do another hiking trails of the Pacific Northwest in person, maybe. In the meantime, stay warm and safe. Bart, I really hope you do that big adventure.
Well, if there's anybody out there who wants to fund it, let's talk.
Rizzoli, are you listening? So
there we go.
Anyway, great book, great fun having you all. Craig and Bill, thank you for leading me through your books on so many good hikes. And I will now say good night to everybody. You have any other things you'd like to say before I hit the end button?
I just want to say just a heartfelt thank you to Sunriver Books for putting on this presentation. Thank you.
Oh, that's sweet. Thank you, Bart. So with that, I will say good night. I'm going to hit the end button now. So thank you all for joining us. We've had a nice crowd here tonight. Although we can't see you all, I hope we can see you in the store in person next year. Have a happy holiday season, and may 2021 be a kinder, gentler year. Take care. Good night.
Night. Thank you.